It's great to have you on today's webinar, which is all around internal communication, and this is a topic very close to my heart. I've had, I guess, the privilege and the challenge of managing internal comms on many different council projects, and it's pretty much universally the poor relation of other forms of communication. Generally, it gets forgotten in the hustle and bustle of getting the message out to external audiences. And I can see from the poll results there, we're still collecting responses, but most people have voted. So far, we've got 62% saying that less than 10% of their resources are allocated to internal comms. So I wanted to have a chat to you today about why internal communications has never been more important. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that you all get it. You just don't necessarily have access to the resources you need. But hopefully this will give you some ideas and also some ammunition when it comes to actually lobbying your executive and going through your budget process, and also considering how you allocate your own resources within the communications team budget. Before we get into it, I want to mention the masterclass that we've got coming up in Sydney just in a couple of weeks now. So if you're in New South Wales, in Sydney, or able to get to Sydney, Thursday the 2nd of November, this is a fantastic one-day workshop on credibility and influence. Now, I've run this a number of times and it gets an overwhelming response from council professionals because it's unlike any other type of training or workshop that you'll do. You'll come away with new confidence in your role. You'll come away with new inspiration for what your end goals actually are, and you'll have some concrete tools to make you more influential and more able to communicate with confidence and credibility in your role. Whether that's interacting with your mayor or elected representatives, or maybe the media, members of the community, people within your council, senior leaders, team members, colleagues. These are skills that we're not necessarily taught at university or in our previous roles. So I really encourage you to jump onto localgovcoms.com.au. I'll remind you again at the end, and I'd love to see you there on Thursday the 2nd of November. It's at Liverpool City Library, southwestern Sydney, reasonably central to a lot of councils. A good venue to kind of get out for the day. And if you want any more information apart from that, just get in touch with me. I'm happy to fill you in. As I said, I'd love to see you there. But let's get into the world of internal communication. I want to talk about research around who is the most believable in an organisation, who is the most credible source of information. So this is setting the scene. This will help us understand the new reality of internal communication and why it's absolutely critical that, well, A, we focus on it at all, and B, that we get it right. Now, you might have heard about the Edelman Trust Barometer. Perhaps you've heard me refer to it in the past, or you might have heard about it independently of that. The Edelman Trust Barometer is a global piece of research done every year in, I think, around 25, 26 or 28 countries. I'm seeing there on the screen, all around trust and credibility for various businesses and organisations. And the results have been very, very interesting over the last few years in terms of who people see as the most credible source of information. So in your council, this is very, very relevant in terms of internal comms, and I'll explain more in a minute. Back in 2011, the survey contained a question along the lines of, if you were to hear information from an organisation, like your council, who would be the most credible source of information? And back then, the organisational leader, the CEO, general manager, whatever you call them in your state, was not surprisingly considered the most credible source of information, whereas regular employees were only considered to be moderately credible. But it's probably no surprise to learn that by 2013, that equation had actually reversed. In just 2 years, regular employees were considered to be the most credible source of information, trumping even the CEO or the general manager. And that trend has pretty much continued since 2013 since 2013, and you can see the results on your screen there of this year's survey. This is the 2017 results in terms of credible sources of information. And you can see that the most credible source here, far left column in the graphic, is a person like yourself, followed by a technical expert and an academic expert. In fact, these three all tied, but a person like yourself fell the least from the preceding year. And you can see that an employee, a regular employee, is also considered highly credible, whereas you've got to go right down the line to find the CEO or organisational leader. So we're seeing across the board, and you can see the quote here, people in this country have had enough of experts. That's from the UK, but I'm sure it holds true here as well. This whole trend of what we're calling, what's become known as the inversion of influence. So people like you and me, regular employees across your organisation, whether they work on one of the outdoor crews, whether they're in the library, a childcare centre, customer service, whatever it happens to be, those people now carry considerable influence when speaking to the outside world, whereas authority figures, the mayor, the general manager, senior leaders, actually have less interest, less influence in the community's eyes. That's not to say those people aren't credible or influential, but the ratio of that influence has completely shifted, and we can see that played out in things like TripAdvisor, in the fact that, you know, we're also incredibly influenced by what people like us say online, even if we don't know them. That carries over then to the level of influence that your regular staff have when speaking to the community. So what's that got to do with internal communication, you ask? Well, actually, it's got everything to do with internal communication, because now your internal reputation ambassadors, your regular staff across the organisation, are now the most credible source of information. Now, let me just have a look here. I'm getting some comments. We can only see the quick poll on the screen. Can't see the slides. Wonder how I get rid of the quick poll. Still only seeing the poll screen. Close poll. Hopefully that got rid of it. Sorry about that. I don't do these polls very often, so hopefully that fixed it. If somebody could just confirm by giving me a comment that you can actually see the screen. Sorry about that. I'll just jump back to that slide that showed the Edelman Trust Barometer results for those who weren't able to see it. Minor technical glitch there. So you can see on the screen that a person like yourself considered the most credible source of information about an organisation such as your council. Working now, excellent. Employees down here, CEO further down the line. So while I don't suggest you go into your CEO or general manager's office and say, look, here's evidence that you're not influential anymore, you might in fact be able to use this to build a case for the importance of great internal communication. And you can get onto Edelman, it's E-D-E-L-M-A-N. You can see bottom left-hand corner of the name there, edelman.com, I think it is, or just Google it, and you'll find a whole lot of slides and data that you might be able to use. So the inversion of influence. So think about that in terms of what that means for your council. If employees, regular employees across your organisation, aren't switched onto your key messages, aren't bought into the vision of your council, aren't confident speaking about what's going on in the organisation, you are missing an incredible opportunity to harness the power of your most influential and credible communicators. Now that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Considering that most councils don't spend a lot of money or don't place a lot of emphasis on the importance of internal communication. But the world's changed. Obviously the digital age has changed the way we consume information. So now those regular employees, people like you and me, are now incredibly influential. Now when the whole, Facebook era dawned, organisations were more worried about employees posting random negative things to the outside world, and that's one of the reasons why internal communication was important. But now it goes much further than that. I'm not so much suggesting that your staff are out there posting negative stuff about the council. However, what I am saying is that every interaction they're having with anybody associated with your organisation is going to be having a huge impact on that outside party. And here's the real kicker: it's not just during work hours. It's also when they're at a barbecue, when they're on the school canteen, when they're at a footy match, when they're at the gym. Somebody will know they work at council, particularly in areas where a lot of your staff live in your local government area, and I know that applies to a lot of you. Those people are going to be known in the community. Their friends will know where they work. So if they're speaking even a shade negatively about an issue involving council, that's going to be carrying a lot of clout. So, you know, that's a fairly big concept to absorb in terms of then thinking about the importance of internal communication. So that's the context. It's never been more important. And as communicators, regardless of your role, doesn't matter if you're the communications manager in your council, whether you're a mid-level communications officer, or whether you're brand new, we all have an important role in making sure that internal communication is part of everything we do. There's no longer separation between the two. So even that statistic talking about most councils spending less than 10% of their resources on internal comms, it's not so much an issue anymore. It's more a case of adapting the mindset that we talk to staff first. And that's what I encourage councils to do, having a staff-first approach to communication. And if we can get that across to our senior leaders and get some buy-in into that idea, that's going to be a huge advantage for us. You know, there's no doubt there's lots of exciting trends in terms of things that we could use for internal communication. We could do a whole session on technology and what's available. There's not a whole lot of point to do that because our councils are not going to spend a lot of money on it anyway. So it's a bit like looking in the lolly shop and not having any pocket money to buy the lollies. So we're not going to talk about that in great detail, but needless to say, there are trends out there guiding the way many organisations are communicating with their employees. So even if we don't have the budget to do that, we can at least be aware of it and use the resources we have in the right direction. Now, one of those is, I guess no surprises here, is the massive growth of video. And we're seeing this across the board in communication, the consumption of video, the availability, the accessibility of it. It's everywhere. And your internal comms, or making sure you're taking a staff-first approach, video can be a really useful tool. And the other beauty of it is many of your outdoor staff or workers who don't have necessarily access to email all the time do have their phones. And so it's a great leveler. You can reach those staff directly with video. And of course, it's so easy now to shoot reasonable quality video. So this is something that we need to be thinking of. If we're wanting to communicate information to our staff, think about doing a quick interview with the GM, with the senior manager on a particular project. Think about getting some comments from staff and getting those out there to the rest of the organisation. You might already have a platform to do that, but there are many reasonably cost-effective platforms around. I've recently started using a program called BombBomb. It's B-O-M-B, pretty unfortunate name, but it's an email tool for sending embedded videos. It's a couple of $100s a year, which may be feasible for some of you with your budgets, and it enables you to send emails with the video embedded, and you could do, you know, you can customize it to your theme. Now, obviously, sending an email, you're going to be missing a large part of your staff population, so you might want to think of other channels as well. But think about video, think about short video. You would have heard in the last webinar, if you were on the line, about Facebook, that, you know, now people have very, very short attention spans to videos. Facebook Live, they have more tolerance, so they'll tolerate about a 10-minute video, maybe even longer if it's a particular subject they're interested in. So we need to be short, sharp, and to the point. But if you haven't started playing with video, then internal comms is a great place to start. You can kind of get your teeth into it and then see how you like it, see how it works, and then maybe you can start to use it across your external comms as well. Hopefully everybody's hearing me okay. I can hear a bit of feedback or clicking or something going on, but everything seems okay on the screen. Just shoot me a message if there are any more issues there. The other big trend that's happening in internal comms is what's been called enterprise social networks. So these are your Yammers and the Facebook program called Workplace, which is basically internal communication version of Facebook. Now, I haven't heard of any councils using tools like that. I'd love to hear from you if you are. If you're on the line today and you are using an enterprise social network, shoot me a message and maybe we can talk to you on a separate webinar. I think this is probably out of the reach of most councils, certainly being used more in private enterprise. I was just looking at some statistics before, and McKinsey's predicting that about 70% of businesses will adopt a platform like this by the end of this year, which is pretty amazing. But we don't need all the fancy bells and whistles. These can be great tools for interaction, but you know, there are many tried and tested tools that we can continue to use, provided we're doing it with this staff first mentality. It's more the philosophy behind it that's going to drive success. I mean, obviously these days, everything that I've said about, oh, I could hear somebody talking in the background there, that's right. I think everybody's muted, just let me double check. If anybody is showing that they're unmuted, if you wouldn't mind just muting yourself so that we're not getting audio bleed coming through. I can't see anybody unmuted. Anyway, I'll go on. Okay, with everything I just said about your internal staff being your reputation ambassadors, the idea of making sure your staff are bought into the organisation's vision and values has never been more critical. So it's not just about plonking information out there. It's not just about putting a newsletter out or sending out emails. It's about really trying to activate and motivate people and get commitments and create this culture where seamless communication is considered to be part of driving the whole organisation. So this might sound like paradise, but this is something we can aspire to. And if you're in a position of any influence in your council, you can help to make that happen. Let's look at some of the good old-fashioned tools though, and I wonder if you're using any of these. Maybe if you're using others, you can also pop those into the question box and we can have a look at what you're doing. These are some things that have worked for me in the past, not necessarily particularly sexy, not necessarily bells and whistles, but again, it's the philosophy behind it that's the important thing. First one is blogs from your CEO or general manager. And I wonder if you do that in your council. I remember the first council I was working with introduced a general manager blog, and it was like full on high tech. This is a really big deal. And it was actually quite hard to set up because the technology wasn't available to do that in an easy way like it is now. Whereas, you know, today there are many, many different easy platforms. It's pretty simple for your general manager or your CEO to put out a regular blog. And provided it's well written, it's newsworthy, it's not too long, it hits the right notes in engaging people, this can be something that people actually look forward to. It can be something that stands out, and people know that when they receive that blog, they need to take notice of it because it's got something important in it. Of course, you've still got the issue of how you get that word out to your outdoor staff, the ones who aren't chained to the computer all day. Something that I've done in the past. This is all about building up relationships with people at key locations in your council. I think one of the councils I was working for had about 35 different external locations away from the admin building. And I worked really hard to build up a network of contacts at each of those sites, so that for any staff who weren't sitting on the computer, I at least had my little satellite person that I could make sure was distributing that information to the external staff, the outdoor staff at those locations. So build yourself, if you can, a network of communication satellites who can help you spread the word. It might be a matter of printing out the blog, pretty low tech, but if that's got to be done, making sure that that information gets into the hands of everybody so that nobody is disenfranchised in the process. So again, if you've got something innovative that you're doing, something that's working really well, I'd I'd love to hear. So Erin, I've just seen your comment that you tried Yammer but had very little staff interest. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it, that the companies that sell these tools, you know, put a lot of store in how amazing they're going to be. But if the philosophy's not there behind it, if people aren't bought into it, then it's just going to be a fizzer. Staff aren't going to use it. They're not going to be interested because the attitude and the philosophy is not there. The tools are just tools. You know, it's easy to get excited by them, but at the end of the day, they're just the end of the process. We've got to get the beginning of the process right. Other things that have worked, the good old-fashioned brown bag lunch, which is, I guess, a not so fancy way of saying just inviting people to a room and getting somebody along to talk about one of their current projects. Oftentimes, you know, everybody is so busy, they're just head down into their own operational day-to-day stuff that they don't know what's going on in other parts of the organisation. So I did this quite successfully for a while, and it was pretty easy to organise. I think it was once a month or once every 2 months. Just book a room, invite along a manager, or not even a manager, a project officer who's doing something interesting. And of course, being in comms, we know what's going on across the organisation, or a lot of it anyway. And then we just put the word out, bring your own lunch. We might, you know, have an urn and have some tea and coffee or something cheap and cheerful. People come along for half an hour and get an update on something that's going on. It's a great way for them to network, and they learn stuff about what's going on too. Kate's just making a comment here. All our outdoor and hack staff have iPhones, so they can access emails if they want to. Okay, they're usually pretty good in getting stuff, which is great to know. And that's one of the great benefits of the advance of technology, isn't it? That you know, mobile access to information is so much easier. When I started working in local government, this is pretty scary, back in the 90s, you know, when mobiles were like house bricks, outdoor stuff didn't have mobiles, and it was really, really hard to get to them. And yeah, it is great that, that more and more technology is being made available. Obviously, not everybody is still going to be in the loop, so we've got to try other things. So consider a brown bag lunch. Consider the comms team doing a brown bag lunch, putting something on just to talk about projects you're working on. That's great internal promotion for what you do, helps you form valuable relationships across the organisation, and, you know, just spreading the word, spreading the goodwill. Doesn't need to cost anything or cost a lot, and it can be very successful. Again, you know, we're all over-connected but really disconnected in terms of personal relationships at work, so this is a great way of reconnecting with people. Something else that can work really well is after the council meeting, just sending around a wrap-up just of the key resolutions. Now, again, I know you've got formal minutes and you've got formal processes for that, but you know, I've done this in the past just independently of the minutes process, because I'm at the council meeting covering all the discussions from a media point of view. You can pretty easily just say, here are the key decisions last night, and send that around to key people. Again, that helps to position you as an influencer in the council, but it also just helps to keep people in the loop. They're probably, you know, they may not read the formal council meeting minutes, but there might be things in there that they need to be aware of. And, you know, you might have to get clearance to do that, but if it's an extra step that's going to keep people informed, it's pretty hard to imagine you're going to get a lot of resistance to that. And that can just be something really simple, can be an email. And again, if you've got your satellite people at your various locations, swimming pools, golf course, airport, whatever facilities you've got in your council, you can get that information out to them, and then they can pass that information on to the people at their site. Cascade Sheets, which is kind of a similar concept, and I guess this is the concept of cascading from the top, but it doesn't necessarily have to be top down. It could also be across the organisation. And I guess this is modelled on, you know, in trades, building sites where they have toolbox talks. So at the beginning of every day, they'll get together and run through the key issues going on that site, key things they need to be aware of. Are there any safety aspects, key messages from the company management? So I guess I took that and adapted that to my own version of a toolbox talk, but in terms of council news. I called it a cascade sheet, but, you know, it doesn't have, you can call it whatever you like. And it was simply a core set of messages, and I think we did this once a week, for anybody who was holding a meeting. So it started at executive level, it went to senior manager level, and then down the line, so that everybody had the same sheet of messages, and that had to be discussed at every staff meeting. Now, obviously with this, you're depending on the goodwill and the commitment of management staff, of team leaders. And again, this gets back to the organisation recognising the critical importance of internal communication. But it can be very powerful if you can get to a stage where there's only a handful of messages, it's not complex, but you start to get this consistency of communication. People are then hearing it from their team leader or their immediate supervisor. Again, it can be a very cost-effective way of getting information out, and you can slice and dice that from other information that you're putting together. It doesn't have to be an extra lot of work to put that information together. So just a little idea there. So again, you might be doing something similar in your organisation, or you might be about to try something. So keen to hear your thoughts on that, whether that's something that could work for you. Obviously, we're in such a visual age now that anything that you can do that visually stimulates people is going to help get their interest. And again, that can be pretty low tech. I remember one big IT change management program that I was managing the communications for, and the subject matter was pretty boring, I've got to say. A whole string of messages about IT changes that people didn't really want to read. But we packaged it up and gave it a visual identity, but it was something really bizarre. I think it was all around this idea of juggling multiple projects, and so we had a clown juggling. That was the visual prompt. The IT people nearly had a fit because it wasn't very serious, and they thought we were making fun of their projects, but they came around, and in the end it really took on a life of its own. Every time people saw this juggling clown, they knew that this was important information they had to pay attention to about this IT project. So that was super simple. I think at the time I just took the image from clip art or borrowed it from somewhere. It didn't cost anything, but that was a fairly effective way to get people to take notice. Now, most of us have also got our beloved intranet, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never heard anybody in a council say that the intranet is working or working well. Everybody always says the intranet's terrible and needs working on. And I think that's because it really is a repository of information. There's never really any reason for people to go there. I'm not suggesting that you spend a lot of time trying to get resources for your intranet. What I do suggest, though, is your internet, your external internet, can be a great source of information for staff and is underutilised, in my view, in terms of informing people in your organisation about what's going on. So most of you are spending a lot of time and resources on your websites, so make sure you're letting staff know when there's new information added, when you've got some new add-on that's really exciting. Make sure you're letting staff know about it. So that's another way of keeping them informed, and then they're helping to keep abreast of what's going on. They're up to date with information. Sometimes that's a bit of a wasted resource and we're not using it for internal comms, but maybe that's something that we could be considering. Now, of course, anything to do with internal comms in a council, we always have to think about our outdoor staff. And I know that, some of you are commenting that your staff are a bit more connected these days, which is fabulous. But we do have to, we do have to recognise that many of your staff are not going to be connected. We've also got large organisations, very diverse workforces. You're going to have very varying literacy levels, levels of English, all of those things which are going to help to make the challenge of internal communications more complex. Our organisations are so incredibly diverse, even with the range of professions and qualifications our staff hold. And this is an ongoing challenge. And I don't have a magic wand to say to you, one method is going to reach all of your staff. That's not the case. This is a matter, again, of you having relationships across the organisation, which, even for external communication, you obviously need those relationships so that you're knowing what's happening in the council. You can also use those relationships in reverse to make sure that you're taking every opportunity to get information out there. Again, it's not so much the fact that you want the guy who sits on the ride-on mower in the park to be out there spruiking the council's corporate plan. That's, you know, probably not going to happen. But it's giving staff a general awareness of the key things that are going on, the key messages, the key processes. So if he does get bailed up at a barbecue, rather than joining in the negative comments about an issue, he at least knows the process of saying, well, look, if you feel strongly about it, why don't you do X, Y, Z, and being able to advise his mates or people in the conversation of where to go next, so that staff are being positive ambassadors rather than remaining silent, or even worse, joining in the conversation in a negative tone. Because again, if they do and people know they work for the council, that is like poison. That's going to undo 6 months of great proactive communication work on your part. It's going to undo having a fabulous website, having great social media, having a dynamic mayor who says all the right things. You get a couple of staff in their social circles saying negative things about council projects, that's going to really carry a lot of weight. So food for thought there, hopefully. So I guess at the end of the day, my message here is, you know, blurred lines between internal and external comms. You can't hope to have effective external communications, in my view, if you're not taking internal communication seriously. Now, again, that can be challenging because you don't have a lot of resources, but hopefully, you know, from this discussion, you can see, and you've been reminded, that you have tools at your disposal. It doesn't need to be high tech, doesn't need to be high budget. It just requires a mindset of staff first, of recognising your frontline ambassadors need the information first. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that staff hear about important council decisions, council news, from external media or from people outside the organisation. That's not going to be engendering positive feelings in them that's going to get them on board as positive brand or reputation ambassadors for your council. So I love this graphic. This little creature is an anableps. It's a South American fish. Some of you might have heard me refer to this before, because it's such a great analogy for us as communicators. Because sometimes it's easy for us to say, you know, that's all nice, but it's not in my job description. My plate is already full. My dance card is full. I can't take on any more duties. How am I supposed to do that as well? And, you know, I'd suggest to you that our roles are shifting along with this great disruption that's going on across all industries. Councils are no exception, and our roles as communicators have shifted as well. So we're not the gatekeepers of the council's reputation anymore. The general staff are. They're the gatekeepers. They have it in their power to enhance or destroy the council's reputation. So our role is to give them the tools they need to be saying the right things. Because if they're saying the wrong things, our external communications haven't got a hope of succeeding. So think about it this way. The anableps is a four-eyed fish. Two of its eyes sit above the water looking for predators. The other set of eyes are under the water looking for prey. And that's really how we need to be as the professional communicators within our council. We need to know what's going on outside the organisation, what's being said, what we're saying, what interactions are going on in the broader community. But most importantly, we also need to know what's going on inside, because the two are intertwined. We need to make it our business to invite ourselves to meetings, to get on to mailing lists, to listen in on discussions around important issues, to not take no for an answer if we're excluded from discussions, to find out the information anyway, because our council's reputation depends on it. And our job is to make sure that that reputation is being fostered and protected and promoted by everybody across the council, not just the leaders, not just the elected members, but all staff. So, you know, we have a great responsibility, but these are exciting times. You know, we've got amazing tools at our disposal. It's getting easier and easier to reach people with digital communication, but the old tools work as well. We just need to have that determination that communicating with staff is paramount and needs to be factored into every project. I mean, I still see when I go into councils to manage or help manage communication around projects that they've done a lot of work planning for their external comms, but they haven't even given a thought to their own staff. Now, it's our responsibility to get that equation changed and make sure that that never happens, that never happens in your council, that you're always the voice going in and saying, what about the staff? What are we doing to bring staff on board? I just want to leave you with one of my favourite quotes from Hugh McKay. Again, this is kind of a layer over the top of everything we've talked about in this session. It's the message people take away, not the message we send, that determines our success as a communicator. Now that really resonates with me, and I wonder if it does with you as well, because so often with internal comms, in the past, it's been just sending out an email or dumping information out there and then ticking off that, yep, we've told the staff, okay, we've told them, we've taken care of that. But if they're not taking away the right message, if they're not truly understanding our meaning, if they're not bought in to that message and that information, then we haven't been successful at all. So I really want to challenge you to think about the information you're putting out there. This rings true for external comms as well, but our theme today is internal communication. Are you making sure that your people, that your key reputation ambassadors, that those in your organisation who are the most credible representatives and spokespeople are taking away the message that you need them to take away? And if not, what are some things that you can do to address that? The graphic in this slide is taken from the 9/11 Museum in New York. It's an amazing art installation. Perhaps some of you have been there and seen it. And it's made up of a whole lot of panels of blue, as you can see there. And the artist who created it was commissioned to make up a piece of artwork with a blue panel representing every person who perished in that tragedy and the incidents associated with it. And to the naked eye, it looks like some of those panels are the same shades of blue if you look at it. But in fact, this artist went to incredible lengths, scientific lengths, to make sure that every panel is a slightly different shade. So some of them are slight nuances in their shading. This is a great reminder to us as communicators that the people we're talking to are not, they're not an homogeneous blob. They're not all the same. They are different. They consume information differently. They have different needs. They have different interests. They have different networks. So again, when thinking about council staff, they're not a singular commodity. They're a group of people very, very different from each other. And so we need to tailor our messages and our methods accordingly. So it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all. As in any form of communication, we always need to be considering our audience, considering the channels we have available to us, and tailoring our messages and our methods to make sure that our audience is taking the messages away that we need them to take away. So internal communications, not to be overlooked, not to be sneezed at, and integral part of all of your communications, can't be separated from the external. But I encourage you to notch it up a few ranks on the priority scale, even if you don't strictly have the resources to do that. Use whatever influence you have to broaden the organisation's focus on making sure its workforce is always as informed as it can possibly be. So this idea of influence we'll cover in more detail at the masterclass that I mentioned at the start. So again, if you're in and around Sydney, Thursday the 2nd of November, I would love to see you at Liverpool City Library, and you can jump on to localgovcomms.com.au to find out more and register, or just shoot me a message and I can send you some more information. So that brings us to the end of our webinar. I'm just checking the questions in the comments here. I can't see any more questions or comments. Thank you so much for being here with me and for your interactions today. I hope that's been of use. Please also shoot me a message if you've got suggestions of other topics you'd like to see covered in these webinars. I want to make sure that I'm giving you information that's of direct use to you and your role, as I trust today has been. If you've got suggestions, if you'd like to be featured, if you're working on something really exciting in your council, I'm very happy to feature you in an upcoming webinar. So just let me know. Either shoot me a message through the webinar portal here, or post in the Facebook group, or shoot me an email. So thanks again. Wish you well in all your projects and your internal comms, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye for now.